everybody, my name is Tanya and this is my December wrap-up. So December was an interesting month for reading. As you may or may not be aware, I was out of the country for most of December. I flew off on the 1st of December and only got home on the 23rd. I spent those 3 and a bit weeks in New Zealand having an amazing time, an exhausting time, but I was able to get some reading done around that, mostly because I needed to. So I went into December needing to read quite a number of Agatha Christie books before the end of the month, before the end of the year, to reach my goal. I was able to achieve that, but you'll see that this wrap-up is very Agatha Christie heavy. So first up, I've got 2 things that I almost finished in the month of November, and for one of them in particular, predominantly read in November, but just didn't quite get there. The first one I have here is a chunker. It's an audiobook that I've been listening to for the majority of November, just didn't quite get there, and that is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. I read this one as a buddy read with the lovely Alicia from Ex Libris, who I'll link down below. We've read quite a few Dickens together in 2016, which has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed that and have really enjoyed a lot of the books. This one I didn't connect with so much. I don't know whether it was kind of some of the timing and the things going through my mind that I'm wanting to get to. But I think too I just never quite clicked with these characters. So as this one opens, the wife of a man named Paul Dombey has given birth to a son, the second Paul Dombey, and unfortunately she passes away in childbirth. And so to this man, his son is kind of the pinnacle. He all he cares about is his son and his work and his business and Dombey and Son, and he forgets about the fact that he has a young daughter, and all of his attention is focused on his son and his greed and his pride, and it goes on from there. And it's a very long one, and like I said, I didn't immediately kind of connect with any of the characters. It definitely picks up towards the end, and I don't really want to talk about what happens beyond what I've said already because I don't want to give things away. There is stuff that is spoken about on the blurb in terms of where their lives go after that. As I said, it does get more eventful, more epic towards the end, and I did kind of enjoy how it all wrapped up in the end, but it was a big journey to get there. Then the second book I finished in the month of December is this one. This is Destination Unknown, which is the first Agatha Christie I completed during the month. This one, again, I didn't quite get it finished before I had to go away. I think I was halfway through this one, so I picked up the ebook copy, and I read the remainder of it on my flight over to New Zealand, which is quite an interesting choice given that there are some plane crashes in this book. But anyway, nothing happened on my flight, it was fine. This one is a really interesting one when it comes to Agatha Christie's stories. So it's not one of her regular cozy mysteries at all. This is one that doesn't feature any of her main detectives, and it's a bit more like a spy thriller, I guess, than anything. The premise of this one is a number of leading scientists are kind of vanishing, and they're trying to work out where these men are going and what's happening and what kind of political intrigue is behind it, and they're following the wife of one of these men who is taking a trip abroad, and they're wondering, is she going to join them? Unfortunately, the flight that woman is on crashes, and she is badly injured. Meanwhile, we're following the character of Lily Craven, who is on holiday in Casablanca, and she's about to take her own life. But as she is in the process of preparing to commit suicide, she's interrupted by a man who offers her a different, more thrilling way to die, and it goes on from there. We kind of get the blending of the storylines. I found this to be a lot of fun, and like I said, quite different from Agatha Christie's usual works. I thought it was a great change up and really intriguing. I don't really want to say all that much about it more than this because it's that's not what it is, but it's certainly not her usual there's been a murder and then we're going to detect it and blah 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 blah. From there it's more fast paced, it's more like I said, it's a bit more of this spy intrigue, and I would highly recommend it. And the next thing I finished in the month of December was this one. So I completed the Lord of the Rings finally, my reread that's taken me a lot longer than I expected, which is fine. So I finished up with the final volume, that is The Return of the King, and as always, this was wonderful. I keep saying that I'm going to stop and I'm going to talk about this when I finish the whole thing and talk about the series as a whole, but I really don't know what to say. A lot of you will have a general understanding of the plot of this one already, through the books or through the movies or just popular culture in general, osmosis in your brain. I don't think I can even describe this book and why I love it as much as I do. It's just so epic in its scope. I just have such awe for Tolkien and the world building that he does in this, and the amazing place that he's created, and like it's so intricately planned and plotted. I didn't read the appendices this time round. I have listened to the audio version of them in full before. I didn't do it this time round. But like there's just the history and mythology and the rich detail that he's created for this world really shows. We're following a wonderful cast of characters who I really enjoy and care about a lot. Everything about this I love. It was a wonderful experience reading it. It was a very interrupted reading experience, one because I spread it out so long, and I was reading this while on the bus travelling around, so I was listening to music and talking with others and looking at the scenery around it as well, so it probably wasn't the most optimal time to be reading this in terms of that, but in either case I adored this. I'm so pleased to finally be back in this world. I know a lot of people struggle with this one. There's a lot of walking and whatever, but I love this for what it is in its entirety. There isn't anything that bores me with it. I know it can be a little intimidating, but I think stick with it. The latter books I think are more action-packed maybe than the start of the first one, so if you push through with that, it really does get there, I promise. But yeah, I finally finished my reread. I've been saying this for ages. I immediately want to reread it again, and possibly under less sidetracked circumstances, but that's okay. I love this a lot. Next up, you guessed it, we've got another Agatha Christie. This time I've got this one, which is Hickory, Dickory, Dock. This is a Hercule Poirot mystery, and one that I hadn't read before, and I really enjoyed this. This one, as we open, Miss Lemon, which is Hercule Poirot's, estimable secretary who, is perfect in every way, makes some mistakes, and Hercule Poirot is understandably mystified by this, and he confronts her about it, with it, and he finds that she's worried about her sister, and her sister works at a student hostel, and strange things have been happening there, and different belongings from different people have been disappearing. Some of them, just going. Others have been found like slashed and cut up, and it's kind of slowly escalating, and there's this feeling that something's not quite right. And so Hercule Poirot comes in ostensibly just to speak to the students there and talk about detective work and give a presentation, but really to start looking around and seeing what's going on, and then things go on from there. Things escalate even further. It was really intriguing, really sad at places. I was really interested to see where this one ended up. It took me a long time to read this. I started it and then I didn't read anything for quite a long time before I picked it up again, but I did really enjoy this one. There's quite a wide cast of characters in this one, quite a diverse cast of characters, with students from all over the world. It was interesting trying to keep track of everybody and kind of getting a gauge on what people's motivations or histories might be, so I found it quite an intriguing one. I definitely enjoyed it, as with most Agatha Christie's, and would definitely recommend it too. And the next book I completed was Agatha Christie, surprise surprise. So I've got this one, which is Dead Man's Folly. This is another Hercule Poirot story. It also features the sometimes character Ariadne Oliver, who is a crime novelist in the world of Agatha Christie, in the world of Hercule Poirot. This is one that I've read before, remembered as one of my favourites. I did still really enjoy this one, but I don't know whether it quite deserves the title as one of my favourites anymore. But again, the circumstances in which I read it is not necessarily the most favourable. Very sidetracked, very, exhausted by this point of the trip, but still definitely enjoyed this. So this one follows what happens when Ariadne Oliver contacts Hercule Poirot. She has created like this murder hunt for a fate that's being held, and so she's designed this intricate plot line of a murder that's going to take place, and people will get clues and will have to try and sleuth around to try and find the solution. But she's starting to get worried that something is actually going to happen, and so Hercule Poirot comes down, a murder takes place, it goes on from there. It had been such a long time since I read this one that I had forgotten the whodunit and the kind of motivations, and that continued on. I didn't really get to the point that I went, I know what's happening, so it was great to really read this one fresh and new again. As I said, I really enjoyed it. I don't know whether it is one of my favourites now, and now that I've read a lot more Agatha Christie's, or there are certain ones that I esteem above others, and I'm not quite sure this one reaches that cut. I did recently mentioned it in my favourites Agatha Christie video, and I do definitely still recommend this one, but yeah, maybe not quite my grand ultimo Agatha Christie's anymore, but definitely a very enjoyable way to spend a few hours reading. Then we've got a brief break of something different, and that is this one. This is The Mistletoe Murder and Other Stories by P.D. James. So still crime fiction, and still somebody who is lauded to be quite similar to Agatha Christie in some ways, but with a bit of a twist. So I picked this one up as my, festive reading. This is a collection of 4 short stories by P.D. James that were commissioned over various Christmases during her career. They've now packaged them together in this gorgeous edition. I enjoyed this. I wasn't blown away by it. This is the first P.D. James that I've read, and I'm very glad to have finally read some of her work, and I'm looking forward to reading something full length in the future. I'm glad I read this. It, wasn't life-changing. The first short story, The Mistletoe Murder, the title story in particular, I didn't particularly connect with, but I did find myself enjoying it further as I went on, so I don't know whether, if I went back and read that first one now, whether it would feel different as I got into it further, or whether it just was that first story that I didn't really care about. These are mysteries that feel very much like Agatha Christie, and then, as it says in the description, they kind of have this this turn somewhere along the way that it becomes a bit more, not savage, but they have their shocking parts, and I really enjoyed that. Sometimes it was a little bit too abrupt, and I kind of went, oh, and then being a short story, you don't get a lot of time to deal with that, so I think that's kind of what threw me maybe for the first story, but then I got into that more. Don't really want to talk about specifics because they're short stories, there's not all that much time to really get into it, but this is a series of stories that are, crimes set around Christmas time. One of them wasn't really Christmassy, I think it was January, but, in and around this kind of time of year, and some of them, particularly at Christmas, so I definitely enjoyed this as a little festive read for the year. I don't always do that, but I'm glad I did at the last minute. And yeah, I enjoyed this. It was alright. Then we're back to Agatha Christie again, and I've got this one. This is 450 from Paddington. It's a Miss Marple story. It's one I've read before. It's another one I counted as amongst my favourites, and this one will stay there. Again, I hadn't read this for a very long time, so some of the finer detail was gone in terms of the whodunit and the whydunit. If not the how done it. I remembered parts of that, but it took me a very long time, and really right up into the end, I didn't have a firm idea until quite close to it happening as to the whodunit was, so it kept me guessing again, and I really enjoyed that. As this one opens, we're following the character of Elizabeth McGillicuddy, and she is in a train. Another train comes up close to her window for a time, and the blind flies open on the opposite carriage, and she witnesses a man strangling a woman, and she is understandably quite distressed by this fact. She reports it, but no body is found, and so Elizabeth happens to be going to visit her good friend Miss Marple in St Mary Mead, and she tells her friend, and Miss Marple gets involved, and things go on from there. I was surprised to start with this, that Miss Marple is such a prominent part very early on, whereas quite often with her stories she takes a very long time to arrive. It could be half the novel before Miss Marple makes her appearance. This one, she's kind of right there at the start, then she fades away for a while before coming back. Again, don't really want to say more than that because I don't want to give anything away, but this one will continue to be one of my favourites. I definitely really enjoyed this one. I would highly recommend it. Oh boy, this video is getting very long, but we've got one last one to talk about, and yes, it's another Agatha Christie. So this was my 12th and final Agatha Christie for the year. I finished it on the 31st of December, so yesterday. Cutting it very fine, but I got there. This one is Ordeal by Innocence. It's one that doesn't have a regular detective. It's one that I hadn't read before. I very much enjoyed it. As this one opens, we're 2 years after the main crime of the story. 2 years ago, a woman was found with her head bashed in with a poker. One of her sons was committed and sentenced for that crime. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. He later died in prison from pneumonia. 2 years later, a man, a Dr. Hickory, arrives with the evidence that he couldn't have done it. And so he thinks that he's doing this good thing for this family, telling them that their son didn't commit this crime. But that kind of reopens things for them, and then they start looking at each other and going, well, if he didn't do it, which one of us did? Because it's very unlikely that somebody from the outside could have come in and murdered their mother and wife. It's, you know, probably going to be an inside job, as it were, and so they start looking at one another and trying to work out, well, if it wasn't Jacko, then who did it? And so he's come in and unsettled this family, and so he starts feeling involved and goes about, you know, looking into things himself. Other members of the family are trying to poke into things, the police are trying to get involved, but 2 years later it's very hard, you know, are they going to find the evidence? And it goes on from there. And again, I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed the way it played out. It's very clever as always, and I again would highly recommend it. So with this one, I finished my last Agatha Christie of the year, and, you know, rounded out 2017 with a round 100 books read, which I'm quite pleased about. And yeah, so I finished the year with a couple of things on the go, which will be finished in the month of June. That's fine. You know, it's nice to close things off on the year, but it's obviously not possible all of the time. So I've got an audiobook and a book that I'm reading, and then there's a couple of things on my Goodreads shelf that have been there for a very long time that I probably should clear out because I'm clearly not reading them properly. But anyway, that was everything that I read during the month of December. As I said, I'm very surprised at how much I was able to read, given the fact that I was away on holiday for most of that. But it was a case of necessity in terms of the Agatha Christie's, and there were a lot of them. So this is everything I was able to complete during the month of December. As I said, you know, there's a different theme going on here, and I hope not to do that again next December. We will see how I go. So if you've read any of these ones, or if you have any questions about them, let me know what your thoughts were. As always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.